Let's talk about why you're here today. You're being compensated by the defense in all the hours accumulated, right?
Yes, I am.
And for those hours accumulated, you're making approximately $5,000, correct?
I believe so.
And just for your testimony today, you're also being compensated $2,000, correct?
Yes, I am.
Yet you're not being paid anything by the state, are you?
No, I'm not.
No. Let's talk about what your major concerns with the intoxilizer. You're actually very comfortable with the Intoxilizer 8000, right?
I am.
And you're certified to perform tests on it as well, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about your first concern that you had. The first concern that you had was the partition ratio, correct?
Yes.
Yet, whenever you talked to Ms. Dawson, you didn't actually attempt to find what her partition ratio was, do you?
Well, it's funny because the only way to determine this ratio would be to have Ms. Dawson consume alcohol and then take a breath test and then take a blood test. And I feel that's kind of extraordinary measures for somebody to drink so that we can find this ratio. My purpose here today is simply to explain that since this machine uses an arbitrary ratio, the possibility of her ratio not being 2100 to 1 is very great.
So just to clarify for the jury, you actually didn't make any attempts to find out what her partition ratio was, did you?
No, I sat down with the witness myself. I took the defendant myself. I took all of her demographic data, her body type, body structure, weight, height, family background, and I spoke with her about the alcohol that she consumed that night, and that's how I determined the results that I came up with.
So that's a no to my question.
Excuse me, what was your original question?
My question was that you didn't run any tests or anything to find out what her partition ratio was.
No, my results were based on what she consumed, not on the partition ratio.
Now let's move on. So there actually is no way of telling what her partition ratio was if you didn't find out, correct?
Objection asked and answered.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
This question was actually like her not knowing what her partition ratio was, not whether she performed the test to find out or not. So you don't know what her partition ratio was, do you?
Just as the law enforcement does not, I do not either.
Okay. So now let's talk about mouth alcohol. Mouth alcohol could be anything stemming from burping, correct?
Excuse me?
Mouth alcohol could be burping.
Burping, belching, regurgitation, acid reflux, any gastric event. It can even get caught in dental work, such as dental caps or braces.
It could also come from breath mints and mouthwash.
Yes.
Yet the Intoxilizer 8000 has a special mouthpiece to prevent mouth alcohol from playing a role, doesn't it?
Well, actually, the mouthpiece is more to prevent excess moisture, and especially if the subject were to regurgitate while giving the breath sample, it could be a pretty costly error. So it's mostly to keep the extra liquid saliva out of the machine, because that could cause an error in and of itself.
Well, just to be clear, it does have a mouthpiece to prevent it or help it to prevent mouth alcohol from
The
playing a role.
mouthpiece is not to prevent against mouth alcohol itself. The machine actually is incapable of blocking the mouth alcohol. Otherwise, the 15-minute waiting period would be much less.
But it does help to prevent mouth alcohol, correct?
No, I don't agree with that statement.
So you're saying that the mouthpiece on the Intoxilizer does not help?
It does not prevent mouth alcohol, no.
Let's just move on. Now, whenever you came up with your results, one of the major things that you relied upon was your conversation with Ms. Dawson, correct?
Yes.
And in this conversation, Ms. Dawson told you you had 9 drinks per hour, correct?
Could you repeat that?
With your conversation with Ms. Dawson, she stated that she only had 9 drinks per hour, correct?
No, 9 drinks throughout the course of the entire
9 drinks throughout the course of the night. Yet you don't have any actual data telling you or backing up her story, do you?
Well, I examined the bar tabs and her affidavit. However, I really had no other source to rely upon to get an exact measurement of exactly what Ms. Dawson found.
So you didn't have anything to back up her story, do you?
If something existed that I could go from other than Ms. Dawson herself, I would have certainly looked into that. But there wasn't anything out there. I didn't have that option.
And your results would have been different if Ms. Dawson would have had more or less to drink, correct?
Oh, of course.
And even if the alcohol concentration of the drinks would have been more or less, your results would have been different.
Yes, definitely.
And you actually yourself think that the concentration of the alcohol might have been stronger that night, correct?
Yes, to make up for the fact that she blew a .19 according to law enforcement, this is extremely high in comparison to what she told me that she consumed and what my estimate should have been. Even including these errors, I must imagine that these drinks were stronger than the usual drink, just to account for that huge variation.
And based on this assumption that you have that the drinks were stronger, you didn't take that into account whenever you were determining her BAC, did you?
I'm not able to do that. I can't just guess how much. I have to go by the standard amount of alcohol per drink.
So, Dr. Norton, you want to come here before us today and testify to tell us that she would have been under the legal limit if, say, Danny Dawson would have had actually 10 drinks rather than 9.
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
Yes, you wouldn't come here before us and tell us that Ms. Dawson would have been under the legal limit, say she had had 10 drinks that night, correct?
I'm a bit unclear about your question. Had she consumed 10 drinks, I would have...
Your result would have been different had she consumed 10 drinks, correct?
As opposed to not, yes.
Yes. And you wouldn't come here before us and tell us that if Ms. Dawson had actually had 12 drinks, your result would not have been under the legal limit, correct?
Oh, no.
Now, let's talk about your conclusions. You decided, or you concluded, that Ms. Dawson should have been around the legal limit, correct?
Yes.
And your conclusion was that it was to 0.08 to be exact, correct?
I can't be exact. All I can do is take an estimate, including her physiological and demographic data, and what she told me that she consumed. I can make an estimate of what I believe her BAC should have been, but my real purpose here today is to simply show the potential errors in this machine and account for why there would be such a big difference.
So your estimate was 0.08, correct?
Yes, around a 0.08.
And so Ms. Dawson was still intoxicated, correct?
By my estimation, she probably would have still been intoxicated.
Thank you. No further questions.
No recalls, yes, the witness can step down.
Okay, are we ready for closing?
At this time, the defense does rest its case in chief. We do ask for a quick, maybe 5-minute recess before closings.
That's fine. Yeah, that's